Paul George to the Warriors is heating up. Brian Windhorst was on Get Up this morning and said the Warriors are willing to give him a 1, 2, 3, a 4-year deal if they can make a trade happen to come to Golden State. What does that mean? Clay's probably gone. CP3 is part of that trade. Wiggins, we're going to break it all down for you on this episode of Warriors Digest. Randy Silver here. Thank you for being with us. Draft day is today. We already put out a draft episode. Also, free agency starts this weekend. You don't want to miss any Warriors Digest news. 14% of you are subscribed. Thank you. If you're not, it means a lot to subscribe to grow the channel. And so you don't miss daily, not even daily, sometimes hourly updates coming through this channel. All right, Paul George, what's the news? Trade rumors. Warriors willing to give Clippers star 4-year max contract. As I said, not 1, not 2, not 3, 4. Just like the number of trophies we have with Steph, Dre, and Clay. The Warriors are reportedly willing to offer George again 4 years. Per Windhorst, to this point, the Clippers have only been willing to offer Paul George about what they gave Kawhi Leonard. And we're going to show you that. 3 years at a little bit less than the max contract. And Paul George, frankly, wants 4 years. He wants a full out max. And there are a number of teams out there, I'm told, that are prepared to give it to him. One of them, Golden State. Kawhi Leonard just signed a new contract this year, so $45 million, and it kicks up to around $50 million. As you see at the very top, Paul George, 34 years old. If he opts in this contract, makes $48 million, but he doesn't want to play on the last year. Him and Clippers have not been able to come to a contract extension. He's probably looking for $55, $60 million in that range. So by opting in, what does that mean? He can facilitate a sign and trade. Or if he opts out, then he can try to get that money on the open market, but it may be hard in this financial issues with the first apron, second apron to get that type of money for a 34-year-old. So this is where Windhorst is talking about this. George is limited to only a 4-year max contract. He can't get the 5 years with the Clippers or any team due to the NBA's age 38 rule. And again, the Warriors would have to do a sign and trade to get him. How do we make that work? So we look at what we have right here. We know all this already. Chris Paul, $30 million this weekend will either have to be guaranteed or he's letting go. If it's guaranteed, assume it's going to be part of a trade because that's a big money that we need to make. We have to be able to match Paul George's $48 million. So to go back for a second, again, we have 174 committed. We already know that GP2 is with us. He opted into his deal, $9.1 million. We guarantee Looney's deal, $8 million. So those could be used as trade chips. 174 is where we're at. We don't want to really be above the second apron per Lacob tax penalties. So for us to be able to match Paul George, we have to be around $40 million based off of our thing. So if we look where we're at, Chris Paul's $30 million has to be in there. Then it could be Wiggins for $26 million. That puts you at $56 million. You're basically right there. Would the Clippers do Chris Paul and Wiggins for Paul George if they know Paul's going to walk away? Probably not. I mean, you get Chris Paul for a year. He's been with the Clipper. But then you get Wiggins for another 3 years. 2 years plus an option on the contract. So at least you're getting a wing to replace a wing. However, they're going to probably want someone younger or something of that nature. So that takes you to Chris Paul, potentially Looney. So then you're at $38 million. And then you see that guy right there, Jonathan Kuminga, $7 million. $46 million at that point. Did I do that right? $45 million, excuse me. So you'd be right there, and probably a first-round draft pick or two would have to be there. We just saw what Bridges was able to get Brooklyn, 5 first-round picks from the Knicks. You would assume Paul George, if he's willing to sign a contract with a team, Clippers would negotiate 3, 4, 5 first rounds. But if you can get potentially 3 players back, maybe the Warriors can get 1, but I don't expect that. 1 being giving up only 1 first round. So again, when we look here, the money has to work. Say Clay wants to go to the Clippers. He could opt in. You give him $30 million. Then maybe it's Clay, Looney, and Kuminga, or Clay, Looney, and Moody. Maybe it's Wiggins, Clay, and somebody else. So there's going to have to be variation. Paul George is going to come in, be number 2. I put out the video yesterday. Do not trade Kuminga. Anything that is a Kuminga trade for Paul George, Kuminga is 21. Paul George is 34. I don't think it's a good trade. Now, let's look at the stats to prove that as well. So, Who is this? This is Klay Thompson stats. Played in 77 games this season. Pretty good. Played a lot of games. Started. Now, if we go over to Paul George, you look at the final season. Played in 74 games this season. Was relatively pretty healthy. But the past couple seasons before that, had some injuries. And then you look at Wiggins. Wiggins played in 71 games this season. So across the board, no, everyone here has been pretty healthy. What does Paul George bring that Wiggins and Klay don't have? Just his overall scoring. Look at his scoring averages, averaging 20 points a game since 2014 when he had the horrific leg injury, which is impressive. Wiggins is giving you only 13 points a game. Klay is giving you 17, around 20, but we know his shooting went down. 3-point percentage, Klay was at 38%. George was at 41% this season, so that'd actually be an upgrade. He's a better 3-point shooter than people say. Of course, he's not shooting as much as Klay, and Wiggins went down significantly. Field goal percentage, Wiggins at 45%, George at 47%, Klay at 43%. And then when you look at the other stuff like rebounds, assists, and blocks, Klay's 3, 2, and 5 at 0.5. Paul George is at 5, 3, and 0.5. And then Wiggins is at 4, 1, and 0.6. So very comparable players. Again, Wiggins is 29, Paul George 34, Klay 34. But you're giving up a lot in your depth if you have to give up Chris Paul, say Wiggins, and potentially Moody or Kuminga. I want to do that. I think it's too much. Again, this is what the Clippers have. So if they get those players back, I'm not a big Clipper guy in the know, but my starting lineup, again, is Kawhi Leonard. Whatever happens with Paul George will probably decide if James Harden will come back or not. So there's your starting point guard and backup. Norman Powell. Zubac is your starting center. Terrence Mann has started, not started. Westbrook has gotten in and out. You think if they get Kuminga, he's going to start. Chris Paul, floor general. Maybe he back up James Harden. Wiggins probably goes in and starts or a 6-man. So there's room there for the Clippers. They were really good to start the season, and then injuries kind of, hurt them mid-season, and they never got their form back, and they tapered off, and they did not do well in the playoffs. So they need some help. And they're also going into the new Intuit Dome, their new stadium, being outside of Crypto.com, outside of the Staples Center, former name of it. Now they can see what they can do, and they want to have a great season in their first season there. What other teams may want Paul George? Sixers. However, I'm not sure Paul George really wanted to leave the West Coast per Windhorst. So Philadelphia, even though they have cap space and they have some trade assets there in terms of a draft pick, probably not going to go there. He's from LA. That's why he wanted to get to the Clippers or the Lakers. He loves living on the West Coast. His family's out here, kind of like Kawhi. I see him on the West Coast. So for George to get what he wants financially in terms of obligations of years on his contract, he opts into his deal, $49 million, and that puts the Clippers, again, at $174 million. They can't do really – sorry, wrong team here. Look at here, $174 million. So they're the same. That's not signing James Harden. That's not signing anybody else. They're going to be at that max apron too. So by Paul George putting them in there, if they don't want to pay taxes, if they want to increase the team at their size, that does push their hand to say, hey, you either bring me back and you get me more on my extension and it helps that out, or vice versa, trade me and you can get more for that $50 million by getting potentially Wiggins, getting Looney and other players from the Warriors. And that's where Andrew Wiggins being shopped. A part of this is talked about. Again, because of his contract, $30 million guaranteed, Chris Paul, that definitely has to be in there. Wiggins himself, what has he done with the team? Not a lot this season. Yes, he won the championship. He was one of the best players there. But this $174 million looming over the Warriors is the big part, because we don't want to pay this if we're a bubble team, if we're a play-in team, that type of vibe. Paul George comes in, Steph 1, Paul George 2. Hopefully Kuminga's there 3, Dre 4, TJD 5. If you have to get rid of Wiggins, Chris Paul, and Kuminga, maybe a draft pick, then you're Steph 1, Brandon 2, Paul 3, Dre 4, Trey Jackson 5. It's not a terrible team. However, I just don't think we have a lot of depth there to be successful. We have a second proven scorer, which is great. And that means if we're getting Paul George, Klay Thompson's gone. There's no way he's going to want to stay with this team. Financially, we won't be able to pay him. Maybe he would want to stay, but that would be a sign of disrespect. Why? Because you're going to give him, some guy the same age who's not been with this team ever, 4 years that much, and you think I'm not worth that? Cool, I'm going to go get my money somewhere else and go win the championship somewhere else. So if Paul George comes here, you can assume Klay Thompson is gone. If we can keep all three and Klay can be potentially coming off the bench as your six-man scorer, great. But I just don't see financially it working for the Warriors. So that's your update. Paul George is in the news with the Warriors. Are you happy with him here? Are you dishappy with him here? Are there any trade scenarios that would work between Warriors and Clippers that would be effective for you if you wanted that trade? Comment your thoughts. Of course, subscribe to Warriors Digest. We're here for all your news daily and sometimes hourly now as it's coming thick and fast. Out, y'all.